Hi there, this is Christopher Ori, and this One Cool Thing session is all about assessments in remote learning. And so since we went into a remote learning model, the hardest question to answer has been how do we assess learning? Because our traditional multiple choice or short answer essay questions, math tests, they just don't work in this remote learning model. And so we have kind of collectively struggled with how to answer that question. I think some people have been finding innovative ways, but then also kind of bumping into roadblocks and obstacles here. So the focus for this is just to give kind of options, some ideas for how one might check for understanding, ideally kind of like at the end of the year sort of thing, but this kind of fits within any assessment. So in particular, there are many different ways we can assess learning. This one is going to be focused more on student presentations, both live and asynchronously. Steph Rothstein will be doing a whole session on kind of portfolios and writing. So that's kind of like a whole nother category we're going to get to. So fundamentally here, there's kind of two driving questions that are part of our PLC questions. What do we want students to know and be able to do? And how will we know if they know it? And kind of more specifically, this last chunk of the school year is not like a normal school year, and it's a short, truncated amount. So whatever's left in this remainder of the year, what do we want students to know and be able to do, and how can we get them to showcase that by the end of the year? So that's going to be kind of our driving questions here. And I want to just right off the bat just be really clear about the reality of the situation. As much as we hate it, we can't control it. We really have to assume and know that students can and will Google anything. They will use their notes in textbooks. They will message their friends, and they will take advantage of any and all loopholes that we create. So that's just the reality. Whether we like it or not, that is the reality. And honestly, it was kind of always the reality before. It's just even more so because we can't control it. So how do we then create assessments that really do assess student learning, given that they can do all those things? And I think it's fair to say that whatever we used to do for our finals or our final summative assessments probably aren't going to work in this remote learning model, because we just cannot guarantee test security and that students aren't going to use all those things to essentially cheat. So we have to keep this at the forefront of our mind as we progress forward. And so I'm sure you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, right? At the basic level is like the remember. This is kind of the lowest cognitive load of thinking. It's just recalling facts, and then the next more challenging cognitive thing is to try to explain and understand, and then above that is apply, then analyze, evaluate, and then synthesize or create. And so we want to always kind of push our students to think more deeply and apply what we are teaching them, rather than just regurgitate the facts that we're teaching them. Now, if you think about it, the higher up we go on this Bloom's taxonomy, the harder it is to cheat, because it takes more, it's typically more personalized, it requires more forethought, whereas, if I am asking a definition of something, a student could very quickly look up that definition. And so while much of what we want to assess is, do they know this vocabulary? What we want to try to do is create assessments that get to these higher levels, because one, it really shows true mastery and learning, but it also is going to be harder for them to cheat, right? And so Bloom's taxonomy, if you Google it, you'll see that there are all these verbs, these kind of sentence starters. So you could be using these as you create your assessments to help make sure and calibrate that you're like at those levels. And many of you probably already have assessments that are like this. And so then it's about like, how do we marry that with a remote learning assessment? So I want to also say that it's important for us to be really clear about what our learning target is. In this remote learning model, we've really kind of like shrunk the scope of our work and really try to focus on what's most essential. So we want to be really specific about what knowledge and skills we want our students to demonstrate in that assessment. The more that we can use very clear, precise language about what it is we want them to do, the more likely students are to achieve it. And I really want to emphasize here, like, let's not overcomplicate it. The simpler it is, the less stressful it is, the more elegant it is, the clearer it'll be for us to grade and assess learning. So we don't need to be doing all the things. How can we kind of really zero in on what's most essential and not try to do too much here? So again, this session is about two different ways that we could assess. And again, I'm kind of thinking about what we would do at the end of the year, but it could be, you know, anytime throughout a year. So we have our synchronous and asynchronous learning. So in one category is like, how would we do some sort of summative assessment or some sort of assessment that is live in class, where students are kind of like on the spot in class, kind of like what they would be normally in our class, versus how could we do that asynchronously, where students are working on it for days or weeks leading up to that day, and then maybe submit it on that day. And then what do we do on that day? So in either synchronous or asynchronous, there's some really core essential tools that will do most of the heavy lifting for us. The G Suite gives us a lot of the creation tools. I would leverage, you know, Google Slides and Google Docs, even some of the accessory ones like Google Sites. There are these kind of core tools, and then our video recording tools. We have Screencastify is a fantastic way of recording screens and creating videos. Flipgrid also now has the ability to do screencasting, which is really powerful, and that's great because students can then also easily watch and respond. And then we obviously all have Canvas, where we can have students turn in that work, but then also we have this whole ability for students to watch the videos within Canvas and peer review. So now students can see each other's work and give feedback. If you had a rubric, they could be evaluating each other with that rubric, which you could then see and even calibrate with how you're grading them on your own rubric. So these are kind of our core tools. There's some accessory ones. There's lots, but I'm just going to spotlight a couple different ones. Wakelet is this really cool tool that is designed for curating content, and it has Flipgrid actually built in. So say students have done a variety of video projects, or they've done a variety of writing, say they're kind of doing a portfolio type thing, they could actually link all those videos or documents or websites or whatever they've made into a Wakelet presentation, and then they could record a video up at the top and respond to or describe what's in that collection. So that's really cool. Infographics are super powerful. It really gets to those higher level Bloom's Taxonomy actions. There are a variety of different ones. I make a lot of my newsletters with Easly, but Canva, Pictochart, there's others. You can even use Google Slides. This can be really powerful because students in this way are synthesizing information, and it really takes a true understanding to like boil it down to its most essence into an infographic. So that's another really cool opportunity. Adobe Spark and Adobe Video is a really cool platform where students can create these kind of interactive web pages. They can even record videos. So all of these could be used both asynchronously or synchronously, and believe me, there's lots of others. And don't be afraid to let students find a tool that matches their interest and their ability. Again, if you have really clearly identified what you want them to know and be able to do, let them have some choice so long as they're able to effectively demonstrate that learning. So synchronous sessions. So here's some ideas. So this would not be my ideal or recommended. I think it's still a little clunky, but here are some ideas that I think you could do. So this is if you really want students to demonstrate their learning live. So TED Talks can be really powerful. I have information of how you can do TED Talks in your classes, but students would basically come prepared on the day of the assessment, and they would present their talk via Google Meet or Zoom, and they would need to do that within 5 minutes. And so in that way, everybody would be watching each of these TED Talks, but the students would be performing the TED Talk live through Meet or Zoom. You'd want to think about, well, what are the other kids going to be doing while they're watching? But that would be a very live synchronous assessment. The next idea is kind of like maybe like an assessment. You know, if you've narrowed it down to, say, just randomly 10 topics that are kind of like most essential that's left in the year, and you want to assess on that, or there's 10 topics for this particular assessment, you could tell students, these are the 10 topics, here's what you're going to do. When you come on the day of the exam, you're going to have X number of minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go to Screencastify or Flipgrid or some other platform and record your response. So whether that's like record a video of you showing yourself doing a problem or doing a quick little screencast, but they're kind of like on the spot, and you have, you know, this many minutes to submit it through Canvas, and then that's it. So here they don't know what they're going to get. They would show up to class and get one randomly assigned to them, and then they would have to go and perform. So this would put them on the spot, and you know that they would at least have prepared for those 10 topics. The kind of third kind of idea is that students could use the days and weeks leading up to the presentation or to the day to make their visual representation. So think like an infographic or an Adobe Spark page or something. And then students would, so this is kind of like the TED Talk in a way, students would then do a live presentation through Google Meet, where they would then share their screen and walk through that presentation. So a lot of teachers have done student presentations, so this is really just modifying it into a remote learning model. The other way of doing this would be asynchronous. So I liken this to more of a celebration rather than a performance. So use this option if you really want to use that day, say that day of the final, to celebrate student work. So less about them performing and more like, hey guys, look what all you've accomplished. Also think about, you know, if we're really creating assessments that are moving up into that higher level of Bloom's taxonomy, higher order thinking really does take additional time. So we want to really allow students time to demonstrate that deeper learning. And so asynchronous really lends itself well to this, because students can then have, you know, 2 weeks to prepare, and then they are actually you know, showcasing that work on the day of the assessment. So then what do you do on that day? Well, this could be a great opportunity to have students look at each other's work and give each other peer reviews, or maybe reflections. I've done letters to next year's students. So here's kind of what that workflow could look like. So you give probably the last 2 weeks or 2 weeks leading up to that due date for students to be working on their project. You're using the previous synchronous sessions to check in on students, giving them feedback, seeing what they're working on, and giving that progress. And then when it's done, students will like pre-record a video using, say, Screencastify or Flipgrid, and then they will submit it either like the last day before or on the day of. And then when students show up for that last day, you could have assigned students peer reviews. I have a video right here of how to do that. I've had great success in my classes by having students write reflections. So you could use that class time for students to live type on a Google Doc their reflection on the project or the year as a whole. I have always in my classes, one of the last things I do at the year is I have students write a letter to next year's biology students or anatomy students. And here's what I've always used for bio, but this can be really kind of cool. I would often start the beginning of the year by having students read those letters. And it was always a really nice way for students to kind of give a little bit of an insight into what my class is like and what it takes to be successful. And this might be really powerful right now in a remote learning model, because next year there's a good chance we're going to be doing some hybrid of this. And so if you could have students give their, in a lot of ways it's their reflection in the form of a letter to their peers, their learning and reflection, it can be really powerful. So feel free to take that and manipulate that for a remote learning model. So I hope that's helpful. These are just some of many ways in which you could assess learning. This is a super challenging, totally unprecedented time that's challenging so many aspects of teaching and learning. So just do your best. Don't try to overcomplicate it. It's not going to ever replace what we did in the class. So we're really just doing our best to check for and monitor student learning and get them to showcase their work. So please reach out if you want or need any support, how to tailor it to your class. I've created a Flipgrid topic for teachers to share ways that they are making their synchronous sessions more engaging, or actually, sorry, I should have changed this, ways in which they have been assessing student learning. So if you scan this code or type on this link, you could share what things you've done for assessments, and that might spark some ideas in discussions with others. So check that out, share your content. I would be greatly appreciative. All right, I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.